it's okay with everyone, I think we can go ahead and get started, since I think we're now streaming live on the city's streaming channels. My name is Robert Watkins. Welcome to the July 2022 Board of Architectural Review meeting for the City of Charlottesville. I'm city staff, and I am moderating tonight's meeting and making sure that it runs smoothly virtually. I'm also joined by the chair and the rest of the BAR, most of whom are here in person in City Space, but we are also joined by BAR member Ron Bailey, who is attending virtually from home. And also here in person is Jeff Werner, who is my colleague on city staff. To applicants who are on the call right now who aren't here in person, when it comes to your time to present, I can unmute you and allow you to talk, and then also share the screen from the document that you submitted for just visual review. And you can direct me to go to any page that you need to. For members of the public who are on the call right now, I can allow you to talk at the different points at which we have public comment. At the beginning of the meeting, there's time for public comment on items that are on the consent agenda or for items that are not on the agenda. And then before each application on the regular agenda, there's time for comment on those specific items. So if you wish to provide comment, just hang around and you can raise your hand at the appropriate time. I can go ahead and pass things off to Brett Gastinger, but if I'm forgetting anything or if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Thanks.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just add, I know that 415 10th Street could easily be a consent agenda item, but I put it on the regular agenda because I think I mentioned before to some of you, it's never want to pass an opportunity to have a discussion about an interesting historic site in the city, and I think, you know, even if just a few minutes of conversation of the history of that place and why it's being evaluated, it's always good to share that with the community.
So are we pulling 14th Street?
No, I just was
explaining
the 10th Street IP, just why.
Oh, 10th Street.
Yeah, why I didn't
thought you
have
said
it.
14th Street. I
That's
apologize.
right. Why I don't have it as a consent.
All right, well, welcome everyone to this regular monthly meeting of the Charlottesville Board of Architectural Review. And I want to say a special thank you to those projects that were not able to be heard last month because of an unusual situation where we did not have quorum, lots of people traveling this summer. So according to that change in our meeting, those projects were pushed to this meeting, so thank you for your patience. As we go through the projects, staff will introduce each item, which will be followed by the applicant's presentation, which should not exceed 10 minutes. I'll then ask for questions from the public, followed by questions from the BAR. After we go through all of the questions, I'll ask for comments from the public and then from the board. For each application, members of the public are each allowed 3 minutes to ask questions and then 3 minutes to offer comments. Speakers, please identify yourselves and provide your address. And if you're here in the room, please speak clearly into the microphone. It's key to connecting with those listening online. Comments should be limited to the BAR's purview, and that is the exterior aspects of the project and our guidelines. Following our discussion and prior to taking action, I'll give the applicant up to 3 minutes to respond. So thank you. And for the first item on our agenda is a space for matters from the public for items that are not on the agenda or if they are on the consent agenda. So please either raise your hand, press star, is it star 5? Star 9. Star 9, if you'd like to raise your hand if you're listening online.
Chair, I'm sorry. I see some people trying to get in, so I'm going to go help them get in first.
Trying physically to get in the door.
I'll be back.
This is post-COVID problem. Can't get in the meeting room.
Okay. they're being let in.
Okay. Do we have any speakers from the public on Zoom?
Mr. Chair, I have one raised hand right now from Paul Wright. Mr. Wright, I will allow you to talk, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. My name is Paul Wright. I live on Preston Place, and I'm talking to you about the 605 Preston Place. Basically, as you've been talking about it earlier, I will tell you that when this was titled as rearrangement of windows, balconies clearly aren't windows, but that from the elevation, I'm quite aware of the east elevation is the one that has changed from 4 Juliets to 2 large balconies. And from the elevation yourself, you cannot tell me or anyone how deep those new balconies are because of the balconies that are currently on the edges of those elevations already. As you look at the south elevation, it shows some protruding large balconies, and what you cannot tell is the Juliet balconies and their conversion on how big that balcony is. As to the assertion by some that there would be no noise issue because of the building next door, I would love to teach you about acoustics and waves and how sound bounces, because those balconies will in fact impede upon the residential experience of several people, including myself and including some people on Preston Place 611. In previous meetings, the balconies were much discussed and were quite a bone of contention, and the fact that I now supposedly have to come up with some part of the code that allows you to look at this, I would tell you that it is simply a matter of quiet enjoyment. The Juliet balcony conversion to a larger party balcony in this area is most certainly going to basically make the neighborhood a louder place. But I've heard what most of you have said already, and I guess I'll just leave you with this and mingle a little bit of Shakespeare, because I don't know of any other opportunity to do this. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east elevation, and the Juliet balcony is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious party balcony, who is already sick and loudly laments its place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Next, if there are any members who are here in person, any members of the public who are here in person who'd like to speak, I see one raised hand. If you don't mind coming to the podium, speaking into the microphone, and just sharing your name and address.
My name is Elizabeth Turner. I live at 630 Preston Place, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my neighbors who are immediately adjacent to this project. And I would like to appeal to you to please not allow these changes, not to add any more balconies. Balconies are a whole other matter than windows. Balconies create noise. Balconies reduce privacy. They overlook and supervise adjacent properties. It's already a travesty what's happening on Preston Place. Don't make it any worse.
Thank you very much, Ms. Turner.
Are there any other speakers online for
If-
matters for the public?
If there are any other people who'd like to speak in person or online, please raise your hand. Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Okay. So we will move to the consent agenda. And currently on the consent agenda is the meeting minutes from September 21st, 2021, 636 Park Street, 500 Court Square, 123 Bollingwood Road, 605 Preston Place, and 207 14th Street. Members of the board, does anyone wish to pull any of the items from the consent agenda, or do I hear a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we'll call the vote.
I think there's
No?
discussion
Discussion?
of
Okay.
any motion on the floor.
Okay,
I just, by way of reminder to the chair.
okay. Is-
Because we've had two comments about it, I wanted to express my personal opinion about the support for the changes at 605 Preston Place. I don't find, in total, with 3 of the elevation apertures being changed, that they violate our guidelines, and that's why I'm supporting this modification.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? Nope. Then I will call the vote, or do I do, I?
I
We
think
haven't worked
when we're
this
in
out yet.
person, traditionally the chair has done it, but.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor of supporting the passage of the consent agenda?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye. All those opposed?
Motion passes
Abstentions?
unanimously.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 7, certificate of appropriateness for 517 Rugby Road.
All right. All right, if I work from here?
Yes, and we're also, I'll just share that we're joined by Eric Amtman from DGP representing this project.
And Eric, contrary to what I had said to you the other evening, you're one of several small heads on the screen, so you don't have to be wondering about that.
This big looming video presence, I'm happy for that. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm having difficulty glasses and masks. So this is 517 Rugby Road. It's a fraternity house in the Rugby Road University Circle Venable Neighborhood ADC District. It is contributing. It was constructed circa 1910. You all have looked at a couple things with this before and had previously approved the some renovations to the house and an addition to the rear. And there was a lot of discussion about the condition of the front porch, which the applicant pulled from that prior request and is bringing it back tonight to discuss separately. With that, there had been, back in 2014, the BAR had reviewed and approved the replacement of the window sash, and for various reasons, the applicants, or I guess the fraternity house, never pursued that, and they're bringing it back. What's key here is that none of the existing sash in these windows they were all replacements put in the 80s, and we had a good conversation with the applicant about there are the historic windows up in that dormer with the diamond lights and the entrance at the porch. Those things will be retained. So this is simply sash replacements for the windows that had sash replaced in the 80s. So for those reasons, staff is recommending approval.
Okay,
So,
Mr. Antman, would you like to add to that with anything?
Sure. I think this is pretty straightforward. At least I hope that it is. With respect to the porch, we're returning it to a more historic previous condition with removal of the side flanking, the end pieces, which are treated lumber decking, basically. Removing those and not proposing to put anything back in their replacement, and then doing repair and restoration to the remaining historic components, which are basically the columns and the 2/3 of the entablature, the architrave and the frieze. The cornice or the crown mold and the roof above is non-historic. That will remain anyway. and have new roofing put on it. So we're trying to basically return it as much as we can to a more historic condition without putting anything new back on. And then as far as the windows go, I know there have been some previous projects with replacement windows that have been proposed and denied. And my understanding was those were probably full window systems, including an entire frame that were attempted to be placed badly within existing frames and that didn't really fit. These are sash replacement kits that are specifically designed for replacing existing windows without removing the frames from the walls. So the sashes are removed and the sash stops are removed, allowing a clean surface for these replacement kits to be put in. That jam liner fits tight to the existing window within a very small shim space. There's a little foam backer behind that jam liner that picks up any out of square or racking in the window, but they are sized individually, window by window, to fit snugly and tightly. And the thickness of that jam liner is really only about a ½ inch. And then the sashes sort of pocket back into that. So the daylight reveal that you see from the exterior of the building is virtually identical to what it is before, within a ½ inch or so. You don't end up with a whole new frame and then a sash frame, and now you've got 4 inches of wood where before you only had an 1 3/4 inch sash frame. The daylight reveal is very much the same. So that's really my only comments to add. I'll answer questions if there's any discussion that I need to.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the public?
If you'd like to speak on this matter, please raise your hand in the participant tab and I can unmute you. I don't see any raised hands,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Questions from the board?
I've got ladies first.
Go ahead. Thank you, James. Eric, I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the standing seam metal roof on this. Will this be the first time that metal is on here?
No, I think it was previously. I actually thought that maybe it was now, to be honest. I need to check on that.
Looks like shingles, asphalt shingles to me, but
Yeah,
I don't know, my eyes are getting old.
So the type of roofing that we're proposing is pre-finished galvanized steel. So that'll be a dark bronze color. It'll be basically the same color when it's installed as after it weathers. So there are no unpredictable changes in appearance. And it's really the best system for such a very low slope roof. This roof is about a 1.5/12, which is really an completely inappropriate application for asphalt shingles. And I've never been on a review board that would have found asphalt shingles preferable to a standing seam metal roof in a historic application, or near historic as the case may be. So it may be a change to a non-historic roof.
I'm sorry, so I'm just trying to understand. Or is metal currently? It looks like asphalt to me.
It is asphalt shingle now.
Okay.
I'm saying it's a non-historic roof, however. So we are not modifying that historic condition. The historic condition from the early 20th century is a different condition, which is no longer extant.
Now, page 116 of our packet has some-
Photos of yeah.
James?
Yeah, I had a question, Eric. On your railings that return back from the front columns, you've got two 4-inch by 4-inch posts. I guess I'm curious of the reason for that, because the historic photo doesn't show those. Is it structural, or can we do away with them?
Yeah, I don't think the historic photo actually shows what was there. So I believe anything is really speculation, honestly, at this point. The photographs that we have that show the balustrade over the roof are concealed behind shrubs. So I don't think we have evidence of what was there before. If for some reason you prefer a metal railing there, we'd be agreeable to that. I think it's speculation one way or the other.
No, it wasn't the materiality. I guess in this circa 1915 photograph, the southern railing returning back to the house looks pretty visible as a simple picket railing, but it just doesn't have those intermediate 4x4 posts that y'all have in your detailed sketch.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the length of that railing for load purposes with lots of people.
Understood.
I don't think it's safe.
Yeah.
I think we need an intermediate support that's tied down to a joist below.
Okay.
I also see that we have a raised hand from Eric Edwardson, who I believe is the property owner, Eric Amtman, if that's right. So I might
Yes,
allow him
Eric
to
Edwardson
speak.
is our owner, correct.
I might allow him to speak in case he wishes to add anything.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so it's Eric Edwardson, and I'm not personally the owner, but a member of the board of the company that owns it. But I was only raising my hand initially about the current. It is currently asphalt, which is definitely not historical, but so it was pretty much that's about it. But I figured I'd make my presence known in case you have any questions about current conditions, or at least the conditions in the late '80s when I was in school there.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Edwardson.
Any other questions from the board? Comments from the public?
If you'd like to provide any comment, please raise your hand in the participant tab. I don't see any additional raised
Okay.
hands.
Board comment.
I think doing away with the little wing porches is an improvement.
Agreed.
Yes.
I think the application is a lot cleaner than the things that we were trying to achieve in the previous time we saw this. And so I'd like to applaud both the applicant and the owner for the consideration for trying to put this porch back together in a way that'll last a long time. You know, it's a lot of work to put it back together. Any further comment from the board, or would someone like to make a motion?
Let me just ask a question for the board. I'm sorry to do this. Do we have any materials on the new metal roof? Am I missing something, or any elevations on it? Maybe I should ask Mr. Antman again. I mean, our guidelines do talk about what type of metal roof we want. Pre-painted, standing
the-
steam. I was a little, I was a little bit, anyway. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, go ahead. What, please point me to the page, because I'm just not finding it.
So on page 12 of our submittal, there's a detail showing the roof, the entire porch assembly. That may be helpful. The existing hip and slope of the roof structure underneath the roofing will be retained. So we're simply changing the materiality. The type of galvanized standing seam pre-finished roof that we do has site rolled seams. So they're not the sort of commercial shopping center standing seams that have a clip on them. The hips also get rolled in the field, so they don't have those wide hip covers that you'll see on sort of contemporary retail construction. So there's still a traditional fabrication method in the field. The material is simply pre-painted instead of painted in the field, which lasts longer.
Can I ask let me ask you a question, Eric, and you, the board. So just from professional experience and personal experience, standing seam versus a flat seam. Would there be any merit in going with flat seam here, just because if, and Mr. Seamer and I have been discussing the last couple of weeks, students on roofs and the difficulty of telling them not to, but would a flat seam, simply the standing seam and it's flattened, and that, because what happens when you get up on those standing seam roofs and you step on the seam and bend it, it cracks. And so I don't know, is that something worth considering for up there if you anticipate people being there?
It's really not. We've actually had lots of problems on other projects with full soldered flat seam roofing. And those seams are, in my experience, actually more vulnerable to failing with sort of mechanical cycling, right? i.e. being stepped on, because they're hard and they're brittle because they're metallic. So at least with the standing seam, you've got a better sort of where the seam is actually raised up from where the plane of the water is. So even if the seam's being bent over, the seams come up and they're sort of hemmed over 2 or 3 times, like in a spiral. So even if that's bent over, the water still has to go up one side and through multiple layers of the seam being bent over and then back down. So I think this is actually a more abuse-resistant roofing system than flat seam.
Sorry to interrupt. That's helpful.
If it helps, just I'll mention that the alumni board are very aware of the roof issues. I've never seen this before until I came by this fall and saw the number of people on roofs of some of the houses. And so we want to do everything to keep people off the roofs. It's in fact one of the reasons, apart from historical things, that we said we're not going to expand this thing, across a big deck, because we didn't want to invite more people out there. I look at the standing seams as an inhibition, and if somebody's to step out there and bend it, they're going to be paying for replacements on it when it happens, and they'll be told in no uncertain terms there's a reason that it's set up that way, and they're not to go out on the roof.
Good point. Thank you, Eric.
Any other comment from the board?
I can make a motion.
Please.
Having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including the ADC district guidelines, I move to find that the front porch repair, removal of non-historic porch wings, and window sash replacements at 517 Rugby Road satisfy the BAR's criteria and are compatible with this property and other properties in the Rugby Road, University Circle, Venable Neighborhood ADC district, and that the BAR approves the application as submitted.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Yes. Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions?
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, let's see here.
Okay, next up is 159 Madison Lane.
Excuse me, just a second, Robert. I'd like to stay on to observe as a member of the public. So if you'd like to demote me from panelist, that would be wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
You have to change the image behind you, too.
There you go.
Thank you, Eric.
This is a request for, no, I lost it. 159 Madison Lane. This is a 1928 brick structure. It's a contributing structure within the corner ADC district. This is a request to, well, it's a couple things, but I think the easiest way to characterize is the infill some openings in the brick wall in the front porch, and there's some other questions that Mr. Can had that we're talking about possibly doing later and maybe getting the BAR's input on. At first, this seemed like something that was relatively simple, probably a consent agenda item, but I think there's there's a couple ways to solve the problem that's why I kept it on for discussion. And in the staff report on page 3, which I don't know which, okay, Robert's got it there. So you've got the 3 old openings across this front porch, and you can see there's an awful lot going on that's problematic, not the least of which is the lintels have corroded and expanded. So, but there a couple, the space within there, they just want to seal it off. It doesn't make sense to have windows. It's not a used space. So there's the option of simply an infill with some type of brick. Robert found some examples of where just had kind of a parged masonry surface, or even, if necessary, something could be struck into the parging if that was necessary. So I don't, we're recommending that they be allowed to remove whatever is sort of in there, as it's not a window, and repair the beam or the angle iron across the top. And so the question is asking the VAR what would be a preference, if you all are supportive of it, preference for the infill and how that should be done. And then after that discussion, the applicant just maybe we talk a little bit about the porch itself is brick, and they're having some leaking, and to what extent those repairs would have to be, to what extent can we work with them on some repairs versus things that they would need approval for. So, all right, so the first up is these 3 openings. Jack, are you there? I don't know if any, there he is. There he is.
Yeah, we're joined by the applicant here in person. Mr. Can, if you wish to speak and provide a presentation, you're welcome to come up to the podium and speak into the microphone.
Where we speak now?
Yes, go ahead. Yep, sorry, you can't tell who's speaking when we have masks.
Right. Well, thank you for the opportunity. The house is, approaching 100 years old. It's 90-some years old. And the water on the front porch has corroded the lintels and created a bulge above the windows and a bulge into the edge of the porch over all 3 windows. In trying to assess these, it became apparent that vandalism has eliminated the windows themselves, and they're now covered by screens. And those screens are unsightly, and because of the nature, there's a path immediately in front of the windows, and because of that proximity to the path, people tend to throw rocks through them, and it's been a problem for the last decade or so. And in order to, as part of the repair that we'll have to do on the lintels to those former windows, we thought we would simply put a brick inset into it and just block them off, because as they stand right now, they're quite unsightly, and we think that would be tasteful and in keeping with the character of the building. I don't favor the parging particularly. It's like, standing out. I would prefer to have something more subtle and in keeping with the building itself. We've done a lot to try to preserve the character of it, and like an old lady, it needs a lot more than a facelift. It needs a reconstruction. But that's my case, essentially.
Okay.
It's a practical one as well as a cosmetic one. And, I appreciate your consideration of this.
Thank you.
Any questions? I'm happy to.
Thank you. We'll go right to that and see if there are any questions from the public.
If you have any questions, you can raise your hand in the participant tab. I don't see any
No?
raised hands.
Okay. The board, any questions?
I have one. It would be your preference to fill it in with brick? Is that what you're expressing?
Yes,
Okay.
we would, even if we got the famous Jefferson brick, it's going to be a slightly different color.
Of course.
And matching 95-year-old brick with today's, brick won't work. But we'll get as close as possible and make it look as tasteful as we can. And we want to preserve the character of the building and the character of the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
There are similar, I guess they're windows, some kind of openings below the main level window on the brick side portions. Are you proposing to do anything with those?
Well, we hadn't considered that because they don't have the same problem over top of them between the basement window and the window on the first floor. There's no damage to that lintel.
They're not exposed to the
Yes,
rain.
and that one, we would have no,
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that we're just
that's
talking
into the
about those
kitchen,
three.
actually, the one on the left. And, to the extent we can have light, we would like light. The one on the right, is into a coal bin, disused coal bin. The actual loading took place in the parking lot on the right. The trucks would back up and put the coal in the basement. There was a coal storage room. It's empty now, but
Okay.
that window would just remain as it is.
Thank you.
So I have a question. So where you've got the grates now, in front of.
Yeah, we would like to get rid of
Well,
those.
I understand that, but is that providing ventilation to the space under the?
No, it's all
Porch.
blocked off. I'm not sure what's between the grate and the insulation. The grate just simply holds insulation. There must be what's left of the window frame and so forth in there. I haven't pulled it apart.
I guess, is the space occupiable under the porch, or is it just like a crawl space?
Well, there are voids under there, and they support the huge piers under there, and the windows are located between the piers.
Sure.
The piers support the columns on the front porch, which have got to be pretty massive.
Yeah.
Uh,
Part of the reason I'm asking is because if you're having water infiltration issues with the porch floor itself, having that ventilation helps. And if we're talking about blocking this up, you might possibly be making things worse from a ventilation
Well,
standpoint.
Well, a moment about the water intrusion. The water, the porch is poured concrete and rebar, and then it had a layer of membrane on it, and brick in a herring basket weave pattern was on the surface, or is on the surface. The membrane deteriorated, and as the lintel expanded upwards and outwards because of the rust, it created fissures in the front of the porch on the surface. And what has happened is water has come in there, it's migrated underneath, and it's gotten between the concrete, the porch, and the plaster underneath, and has corroded the rebar. We have had structural engineers look at that, and fortunately, the damage to the rebar is cosmetic. So we don't have to take up the porch or do anything catastrophic, so to speak. But I don't know if ventilation, we've got air conditioners going down there and dehumidifiers, and it's still, the water comes in. It's a function of the drainage situation on the porch, and so we need to fix the lintels, re-brick, remembrane the porch, relay the brick. This is a massive
Right.
kind of restoration project, and we thought we could get it done, but you know, there's so much structural engineers and so forth that we now have students arriving, and so we're just gonna postpone the thing and do it next summer.
But James is right that if there are cavities under there, there's still gonna be moisture in them, and if there's no way to ventilate them, you say there's air conditioning, in the basement?
Well, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no.
Oh, right. Well, we've talked with the contractor to that, and there'll be weep holes to allow for the moisture to get out of there. And they will be, small. I don't know, I mean, I haven't seen pictures of them, but there seemed to be a way of mitigating any water that would, or moisture that would get in there.
Well, that would be doubtful. I think you're possibly, by closing this up, actually creating a worse situation in 50 years. But I'll be gone.
All I can do is repeat what the contractor told me, and he's done this kind of stuff for a long time.
Yeah, they all say that. 'Cause that's why the rebar is failing, not only from the water coming through from the top, but also from the condensation from that moist cavity below, condensing on the underside of that slab.
Well, the water was trapped underneath between the concrete and the plaster, and no place to go.
What do you mean by plaster?
In the bottom of, the porch, the front porch is concrete, and in the basement beneath it, it was a plaster on
Ceiling.
put against the wall.
So it is
ceiling.
an occupied space, or it is an occupied space. Why would they plaster it?
I have no idea, but we had to haul the plaster off so that the structural engineers could examine it. And that's what we found, that the water had gotten between the plaster and the plaster had separated. In many instances, the plaster had fallen away from the concrete, but not in every case.
Okay.
And so what we're trying to do is eliminate the migration of the water from the lintels in the front underneath and wicking its way back there. And we think this is a solution to it that will work. At least we're assured by the engineers it is.
Yeah.
So to clarify, it sounds like the space under the porch is accessible.
It
So-
is, yes,
So this
sir.
is not, this proposal is not fully enclosing a crawl space. It is simply, well, it's already closed off, but does that change your concern, James or Jody? You were previously thinking that this was a crawl space under the porch.
It'd be tough to say without seeing it. I mean, I think the insulation that's behind the screens is also possibly part of the problem because that's not letting airflow under there. And I mean, we see this all the time at the university and elsewhere. Any historic building where you get water mixing with steel lintels, this happens. You know, you get rust and expansion and the brick blows out, all the things you're dealing with. I mean, it is interesting, I guess historically this had a wood frame with a glazed window, right? A pane glass window was the historic treatment in this area. So I don't know, at least that's what the historic photos seem to show. I don't know if those was a glass window or if it was a screen. Do you happen to recall?
Or the original, there were glass windows and they swung up.
Okay.
I mean, when I was there as an undergraduate,
Right.
I remember the house, they swung up and they provided, we didn't have air conditioning or anything like, oh, there they are, right, on the right.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any problem with them, but of late, the vandalism has just driven us nuts.
No, understood. And I'm curious if there's a way to kind of meet in the middle, but
Well, I would just suggest that if it's possible to keep openings between the space under the porch and the rest of the basement to do that. That will help mitigate the buildup of
Well,
moist
it's
air.
all open down there.
Okay.
There are two support walls. If you look at the front of the building, you can see that as the building faced inset, I mean, the porch is an extension, and then the panels on each side, or the walls on each side are set back. And on each side of the porch, there's a huge, very thick weight-bearing wall. And otherwise, between the weight-bearing walls, it's all clear. And there's a lot of air circulation.
And that space is conditioned? That is conditioned space?
Yeah, it's all air conditioned
So-
down there, yeah.
Right.
So if I'm hearing you right, the space under the porch proper is contiguous with the basement?
Correct. I mean, there's some piers that,
Right, so they
that
kind of bump
interrupt.
out into the room underneath the
Yeah.
columns.
But there, there's, circulation between them. And as a matter of fact, there's a bar down there.
I think I understand. So there's piers that support
What?
the front wall of the house itself?
Surprise, surprise.
In between the arched doorways, I guess? The front
Correct.
wall of the house, which is set back a little bit?
Correct.
I got you,
Yes.
okay.
I had one question. I don't know, since you haven't taken these apart, I don't know if you know the answer, but I was going to ask if we knew how much reveal or how much depth you were going to be able to get between the face of the original brick and the inset panel. The
I
staff
was gonna
report
set
suggests
it back
half or
just an inch.
an inch.
And there's plenty of wall there. I mean, there's a 2-foot wall.
But the brick probably only returns a certain amount anyway, the face brick.
Well, we would put something behind it to reinforce it. I mean, we just
Right.
wouldn't be a
Sure.
3-inch brick or something.
Right, right. I mean, the existing brick as it turns the corner only goes back probably 1 brick depth. Sorry.
Not necessarily.
No, you think it could be deeper
Solid
than that?
brick all the way back.
Probably solid
Yeah.
brick, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Comments from the public?
We do have a raised hand. Eric Amtman is raising his hand. Eric, I'm going to allow you to talk, and you'll need to unmute yourself.
Hi, Eric Antman from DGB Architects. Just speaking very quickly as a member of the public, I wanted to try to lend a point of clarity here. I've been out to the site with Mr. Can, and I've seen the conditions, and the basement space under the portico is completely full height interior space within the thermal envelope and sharing a common atmosphere with the rest of the basement. The issue is the concrete slab underneath the basket weave brick was poured with essentially a mini parapet wall around the full perimeter. So the top of the portico paving has a concrete border around it within which brick has been placed. So they built a swimming pool on top of a basement originally. And at a later presentation, I imagine Mr. Can will be back showing you proposals to reconstruct that in its entirety. The steel reinforcing underneath is completely gone. So later water intrusion will be solved. So the issues of ventilation and weeping and all of that will be dealt with by not allowing water to get in behind the windows as it is now. I hope that helps. There shouldn't be any question that it's basement space.
Thank you, Eric. That helps a lot.
Yeah, I think if you look at page 158 in our packet, you can you can see that bathtub condition that he was talking about. See the white, yeah.
And James, just remember to speak into the mic.
Sorry. That was very helpful, Eric. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
If you wish to provide comment, please raise your hand. I don't see any additional raised hands.
All right. Comments from the board?
I personally don't have a problem with the brick proposal. I would suggest a couple of inches for a reveal, for setting back the inset a couple inches. Just, I think a stronger shadow line would help.
I agree.
Yeah, okay.
I would ask that we retain the brick sill that's currently in situ, the bricks that are turned on edge,
Sure.
to
I'm
make sure
assuming
that's,
we would.
that reads. I also wonder if it isn't worth considering, Jody, you sort of pointed out the small windows that are underneath to the left and right of the portico. Does it make any sense to take a cue from those and actually just essentially do a painted wood panel recessed back at maybe the inside of the wall, so that you kind of get back to the original appearance a little bit without having a glass window there? But that's not what the applicants proposed, so.
Well, I was just concerned looking at the other possibilities with the parged, the lighter colors. All of a sudden, they become real strong features, stronger than in the original.
Right.
And this isn't, this is not a significant architectural design feature in the original. This shouldn't be below the main floor. So I'm fine with the brick.
I agree with Jody.
I am too. My only thought was, and just a mere suggestion, is why not carry the basket weave into that brick inset? I love the pattern on the porch. I know it'll have to be demolished and reinstalled, but just something that would differentiate from the facade brick
Thank you.
and the bond that's currently on the exterior of the property.
And I'm in agreement with what's been said already. Would anyone care to take a stab at a motion?
So I'd just like to clarify, Sherry, are you talking about doing basket weave
Inside.
in the vertical surface?
Mm-hmm. Is that not a good idea?
I'm not too keen on it, but that's me personally. It's more appropriate for a paving surface than
Yeah.
a wall surface.
But nobody's going to walk on it. I mean, it's,
No, I get that. I think it's just you never see a basket weave on a vertical surface of a brick wall.
And it kind of implies that then the insets have some historical connection with the paving on the floor.
oh gosh, I would never want to create false historicism, Mr. Alejandro.
I knew you would.
Gosh, I'm sorry to have offended.
No.
I'm the one that brought it up. So I think I support Jody's suggestion of setting it back 2 or 3 inches so there's a clear, strong shadow line and delineation, and you can still, see the recess and know that there was a former opening.
Right. And it'll be a little more forgiving with the inevitable slight difference in color.
Maybe you set it back. Don't set it back so far you can set a beer can there, though.
No. 3 inches is asking for trouble.
And I'm just presuming we're gonna keep the coursing of the brick aligned between the existing brick and the inset the new panel, and match the brick as closely as possible.
Correct.
And the mortar colors
That's
and
right.
joints. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm ready with a motion if you're.
Excellent. Please
Having
proceed.
considered the standards set forth within the city code, including the city's ADC district design guidelines, I move to find that the proposed infill of the 3 masonry openings at 159 Madison Lane, and are we submitting the other changes too, or is it just these openings?
Just that there's some repairs that we just wanted to kind
So
of
should
talk through.
my motion also say just in other repairs noted by the applicant? Lost my location, sorry. is compatible with the district and the BAR approves the application as submitted.
Second.
So for discussion, let's talk about those other repairs. I'm okay with the motion and approving this if I know that the other repairs are being done in kind with the same materials that are being repaired, and that we're only repairing those things that are severely damaged that can't be preserved.
That is correct, yes, sir.
And I think we should include the comment about setting the brick back and aligning
point.
the coursing and matching the color and mortar as closely as possible.
So I'll accept that as a friendly amendment to my motion, Mr. Gastinger.
Excellent. Did we have a second? We did.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Yes,
very
thank
much.
you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. We'll see you again.
Yeah, those are the photos that when I see them, I'm like, oh my God, where to begin? You know, it's not necessarily BAR problems, but clearly, yeah, it's like, oh God. Well,
Yeah, look.
we'll see you soon, right?
Okay, that brings us to 550 East Water Street, Suite 101, pole sign application.
I get used to two screens and it's like going to one little dinky one just makes my world
It
complicated.
definitely is a different skill set.
I feel like I've gotten larger. All right, sorry, this is 550, not 500. Let me take a look at my, yeah, so in the staff report, because Ms. Lewis, you had asked about what it was. And Robert, go down to the third page of the staff report, and right there, and actually it's a roughly scale, it's a very small sign. That's why I was kind of,
Do we have dimension did I miss the dimensions and materials too?
yeah, it's.
Okay.
I think there's a cut sheet in
There was
the,
Thank you.
from
I just
Gropin.
must have slid
And,
over.
so yeah, it was sort of that concern of, it's almost like, gosh, this is so small, but it became the sort of poster child for other questions. But just very quickly, so what this is 550 East Water Street. This mixed-use building was approved by the BAR. I think it was rather contentious about 10 years ago. It was constructed in 2018. This is a request to approve a pole sign, and to be clear, a pole sign is something that's a standalone sign not attached to the building. It's on a post or a pole. They are not allowed, per the sign regs, they are not allowed in the downtown ADC district unless approved by the BAR. And as I said before, normally per ordinance, I review sign permit applications. They come through, go to zoning, and they come to me, and I sign off on your behalf. So you usually don't see these for any reason except for when the special conditions kick in. As I mentioned, there's a reason pole signs are not allowed. Typically, they're associated with Park Street being a good example, where you have a residence that's become a business or a series of businesses, so they fit there. Whereas downtown, we don't have a lot of space between the facades and the street. So for one, there's not much room for signs. So here we do have a couple of them around downtown, most of them located in a landscape bed, which is one of the preferences. It's not somewhere someone's gonna bang their head against it, so there's some space. It doesn't encroach on the public space. And so for those reasons, I thought you all could say yes to it. I think for its size and color, I had no problem with it whatsoever. And I think, you know, the only, as I said, my recommendation is to approve this, but with, and I think even if it's just expressing it in your discussion, that this is not, that this isn't to be seen as a sort of an allowance or a loophole for a series of pole signs across this front facade. And that's with the understanding that if additional signs are proposed, they would still come to you. So I don't know if you have any questions. I wish I had a more complete legal response to you, but that's all I can really offer, is that these will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis.
So is it appropriate to ask that if we take action on this, but then if there are other pole signs in the future requested for this building, that we just alert the building occupants that if that's asked, then we will be requesting a sign package concept for the entire building?
I think that's reasonable, yes. And you're not dictating what something may or may not be, you're simply requesting a coherent plan
Yes.
for this address.
And the owner needs to, or the occupants need to think about that.
Right.
And at that point, would a monument sign with multiple signs be more appropriate to
Could be,
combine
it's up to
them?
them to come up with a concept.
It's possible. I gotta tell you, signs exhaust me. It's it occupies a lot more of my time than I'd like to admit. The ordinance has a lot of variations for various locations. It's, you know, in a certain district, in a certain entrance corridor, in a certain location. So signs sometimes are the bane of my city existence in a way.
I mean,
But, so to speculate what might go there, I'd rather not.
The report does say that in the downtown and University Corner ADCs, freestanding and monument signs shall not be permitted.
Okay, and
So
that, yeah.
I don't think that's a future option.
Okay.
Hmm.
And then the next to note is pole signs are permitted only with BAR approval. But I think Jody's got a good point of, does this open the door to 10 more?
Yeah, this
Pole
is not
signs.
setting precedent that we're going to have a whole line of across that building.
Right.
Correct,
It
and I'm
also-
comfortable, after my conversation with the zoning administrator, I'm comfortable that that is a valid understanding for the BAR. That this is not approving, this is approving this single request.
Right.
Which I would say I have no problem with.
There's also a note in this section 34, 1031, maximum number of signs allowed. Principal establishment may have no more than 2 signs per primary street frontage. So I was trying to look at the picture.
They already have two.
Is the Bank of the James considered a sign on the front? And then would this be the second?
Well,
This is for another
Is
business, I
that a
think.
different building?
yeah, I was
No,
gonna say,
it's the- that's
Same
the
building.
That's the building.
that's the question I had, is what define principal establishment?
Principal establishment?
There isn't
Or
one
principal street
when you
frontage.
have that many
Well, hold on. Where's that?
businesses.
Principal establishment? I don't, yeah, it's good.
So we can,
I mean,
yeah, I mean, I can
Make a note
is the
for
parse
establishment
the
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 building?
details.
zoning rewrite.
Is the establishment the building?
It, there are some terms that that was the question of what is this building? What is this establishment? What is this business? Is this, and the response I got was, that's not that, we understand what you're asking, but if someone else asks for a pole sign, it can, it goes to the BAR, and there's no, so the short answer is, we are only being asked to approve this one, and it does not in any way obligate or compel the BAR to approve any others. And I was comfortable with that explanation, and,
Has-
yeah.
Okay.
Has-
Can we, or is it still with Jeff about this line? Okay. Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Are we still on a staff report, and is
Yes,
the
we're still
applicant
on staff
here?
report.
'Cause
I don't
could-
think so.
Okay, I mean, or here.
Sorry, I can't, the gentleman's name, he was not gonna be able to make it.
Okay.
I told him I would, Kyle, I told Kyle I'd cover the bases for him as best I could. But I think that's just, he's the sign guy with Gropin, so I don't know if he was gonna get into the whole, what else is going on at the building.
So, thank you for putting out the cut sheet. Is anybody else concerned that this is 6 feet 5 inches tall? And
Wait, it's
I
not.
don't know.
it says 76 inches
Where?
on the cut sheet. And that's page,
That is really weird.
tell me I'm wrong.
No, it absolutely does say that, but it's next
And
to a
the
person
rendering
that's
makes
10
it
feet
look
tall.
very-
Yeah,
the
I-
the rendering makes it look about 3 or
No, no,
4
no.
feet.
You're misreading that. The 76 goes down to the bottom of the footer.
Okay.
It's
Yeah, okay,
52
that's
inches
right.
above grade.
Okay.
Sherry, I
Thank
saw that
you.
same thing first time too.
It's that math
and
thing, I know,
that's-
sorry.
And I,
The blonde can't do
Let's
math.
go in before-
No, it's not,
No,
it's
or
not
read a
clear
cut sheet.
visually.
the detail caught me, the height of the sign, to the top of the sign is 4.33 feet,
Okay. And still,
33 100ths of a foot, which we all use around the house.
and,
It is taller than the rendering.
and has the wall sign been installed yet? Or are they
Um,
looking to do this at the same time?
It appeared from the photo that Kyle shared, it has been. And that would not be subject to.
Right,
ADR.
understand.
What-
But it's for the same business, I would point out, like, how many and to the greater concern that we've been talking about, if all 5 or 6 of the commercial units, and say there were several residences within one unit, or, I'm sorry, several businesses, you could get a lot of people, and I just wonder how many Y2 exterior signs are required within about 10 feet of each other.
I can say, outside of this, I've had a lot of discussions with the folks at Federal Realty and Barracks Road Shopping Center, and they're always great to work with and very upfront about things. And I asked about signage, and they said, people today know where they're going because their phone tells them where to go. And they said it's kind of a, that everybody needs these big signs, and all these signs is just really not. But it's a battle we fight all the time. There's a project up near the railroad bridge that wanted to put a big pink sign in front. It's like, you can't have it, but you don't need it. But signage is, our ordinance is got some interpretations in it that when we get to, hopefully the zoning rewrite, we'll be able to sneak some of those fixes in. But I think just the short answer is, yeah, it's just this one. I am, though, stepping back, concerned that, how do the sign regs that the things you don't even get to review, how do they get applied to this building if it's this condominium space?
Right.
And I don't know. So,
Okay, I think we've,
But we're only discussing this particular pole sign, right? And
That's
it
right.
It is no precedent for anybody else, and the practicality of it is that whatever sign they have on the wall would be very difficult for anyone to notice from the street. And that's probably why they want this. I don't see any problem with this. And then any other signs that come up, we could just say, no, they're too many.
ditto.
I think that's correct, and I think we've gotten great background from both the city's perspective and the questions that are asked. I'm going to go ahead and open the request for any comment from the public, and even though there probably won't be any, just fundamentally, I think it's important that we give the public an opportunity to speak to these things. I didn't want to get too far into conversation before that is opened up. And while we're doing that, if anyone wants to take a crack at starting to think about the language of a motion, that would be helpful.
If there are any members of the public who'd like to speak, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Any further questions from the board? I know we don't have the applicant here, but I have a question for Jeff. Was the white sign the first their first proposal, or did they ever propose a sign that was similar to the black one that is on on the building?
All I got from the zoning administrator was the information that you have, so there may have been other things suggested or asked, I don't know. This is what they brought in. If that,
Okay.
you mean, are you asking if maybe this sign visually would look like what's on the wall?
Right.
No, I didn't see anything like that. I
Okay.
don't know.
That's fine. I just
Yeah,
wondered if
I
there
don't
had
see
been
it.
any other conversation. Any other questions? Comment from the public?
If you'd like to provide comment, please raise your hand. I don't see any raised hands.
And any other comment from the board?
I guess I just feel like it sounds like we've asked the city and they said, no, this doesn't set a precedent, but who's to say 10 years from now, none of us are on the BAR and it's different folks in City Hall and it does set a precedent.
Well, the motions that we make will be in the record for this property.
Okay.
So, you know, and Mr. Gastinger, to your question, I mean, there's the criteria for when you're reviewing a sign, you know, this, the color, the placement, the size, it's, the fact that it's a pole sign, you may say yes to a pole sign, it doesn't immediately say yes to this design. So I would say yes, if you have, based on the guidelines, concerns about the shape, material, colors, illumination, which we don't have any, you have the purview to suggest something different. It's not that the guidelines are particularly instructive compared to the other, but it is under your purview if you wish to address what this sign looks like. And you would see that on page 6 of the staff report. Page 5 and 6 are the how the guidelines address signage.
My only concern really with the sign as proposed is the color. I feel like it's going to be the most obnoxious part of it is that bright white sign, as close to the sidewalk as it is. I think it's probably still permissible, but I would prefer that it certainly would be quieter for the street and less visual noise for the street if it were to match this existing sign on the building and with the dark background and the light lettering. I also feel like 12 inches to the sidewalk is pretty close. I think it would probably, at least according to the image that we've provided, I think it probably could do to be a little bit further from the sidewalk.
I think that those are reasonable to you know, the conditions. Yeah, the white does, I don't know if that's more just the color, how it pops out in the image, but it's, you look at the other end, you have that canopy has the white letters on the dark sign, so yeah, the white sign, I don't know why I put a little white arrow there, because it's not like you miss it, but I think that if there's a sense that something else would complement the building better, you all are entirely in your purview to do that, and if the location would like that in further, it's within your purview to do that. But I would say, maybe be specific if you want, and if the applicant has an issue with that, they can. What I would tell the applicant is if, because these are weird, this didn't come in as a COA, this came in as a sign permit request. So, and I would tell them that if you really, aren't happy with the BAR's finding. I mean, it can be appealed, or maybe they need to do it as a separate submittal and come in for some discussion. But does that help?
Well, I have a quick question, Jeff. I thought that what we were approving was the fact of a pole sign, should it be allowed or not, and that the design of the sign was under the purview of city staff or some other group of people in the city, and that we don't necessarily design the sign for them.
Yes and no. I review the sign permits on your behalf. And if I have a question about something, I can bring it to you. In a circumstance like this, the approval of the pole sign is up to you. I can still look at it per the design guidelines, but that doesn't mean that you all can't interject here. I wouldn't sign off on it. We have design guidelines for pole signs and all the signs within the ADC district guidelines. So I fall back on those, but if I'm certainly not going to tell you that you can't comment on those this evening.
Any other comment from the board?
Sorry if I missed this, but our guidelines say that in commercial areas, signs should be limited to 2 total signs, which can be different types. So this would add a third to the building. Are we comfortable with that, or, I mean, that directly violates our guidelines?
Well, we have that's this address issue again. We have lots of buildings downtown with multiple tenants.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I don't know if that happens where they have more than 2. That's
Oh, I agree.
Good
and
question. Yeah.
My business benefits from it, and my building benefits from it. We have a number of businesses in the same, but I'm just sitting here as a member of the BAR that's supposed to support the guidelines.
Are the guidelines specifically talking about just signs on buildings, and a pole sign would be a separate thing? Is that a distinction?
The guidelines address signage by type. Also, the size of the lettering, the height of the lettering, the colors, which is certainly applicable to all letters. The option here is to, I don't have an applicant, so I can't defer it on their behalf. We didn't meet last month, so this is a June application. So if the BAR doesn't take action, then it is, by default, it is approved. So somewhat in a difficult position, at least as far as you all have to make an up or down tonight. Because this is not a COA request, or at least in the ordinance, signing off on a sign permit is treated as, and I don't know the legal way of saying it, but it's essentially a COA. It's essentially an approval of that design. If you all could, from where I sit, if there is a recommendation that you have that you would like to see, you could deny this based on the following reasons, and then I would tell the applicant that if you're willing to modify your sign permit application accordingly, that I would sign off on it. So it would say, or I'd bring it back at the August meeting, we have the discussion again, and just confirm that they've addressed what you wanted. But I think you have to approve or deny tonight, and if you have instructions, then I can speak with the applicant, see if they'll do the changes, and then we bring it back.
I have a question for the rest of the board. For those concerned about the setback, it's 1 feet from the sidewalk and 5 from the right-of-way. How far would you like that setback? 2 feet from the sidewalk, or what would be optimal?
From looking at the image, it seems like it should be back as far as the bike racks are from the sidewalk, at least. I'm guessing that's more like 18 inches to 2 feet.
And essentially you're saying that the vertical would align with the first vertical of the bike rack.
Correct. That was just my gut.
Okay.
But Sherry, I think your point about the number of signage is interesting, because looking at that the business also has a window decal.
Right.
I don't know if that counts as a sign or not, but it is 3 instances of the business's name in that in that photo.
In that regard, zoning would have approved this, except for the requirement that you all approve it. So as far as anything else
Right.
there, zoning has looked at it in that regard.
Gotcha.
So they regularly do approve more than 2?
I don't know,
permanent signs?
I'm saying is that the sign application, sign permit came in, and zoning would look at their ordinance, because their ordinance prevails anyway, and so they would have approved or not approved the number of signs based on what the ordinance allows. So your decision here is not changing what zoning would or wouldn't allow. So, and they would have approved this pole sign, except for that provision that you all have to okay.
For what it's worth, I think we should approve it, possibly with a further setback of 18 inches as opposed to a foot.
Or
Alignment with the,
With the bike
alignment
rack.
with the bike rack,
whatever
vertical
pad,
posts,
like pad, I guess.
Okay.
vertical post
Or the
closest to
first
the road.
Post, okay.
I tend to agree with Brex's on the color, like the wall sign actually matches in some respects I don't know if it's a sticker or whatever on the door, the glass door,
Right.
because it makes it have a black background with the white lettering. It seems odd to have
Yeah.
sort of the photo
Right.
negative on the street sign or the pole sign. I don't know, can we?
Right, and this is clearly for pedestrians trying to find the door, not cars probably.
Well, so would the wall sign.
You don't
frankly.
drive down the street and jump out to get a mortgage? Can we ask them to do that? I don't know if that's, would we need to decline it?
Well,
If you
This is-
decline it, you're just saying no pole, right? That's it.
I believe this is a helpful conversation because it's a little bit of an education for us, but
Yeah.
if we approve this sign for this address, someone who comes in a new business that comes into that address would not need to get approval for replacing a same sign of that same size. I wouldn't think.
I'll be honest, I would have, I mean, not that I am dishonest, but because it's a sign permit and it's something that, you know, we work, they're just a little bit different than those formal COA applications. If you denied this simply based on unanswered questions about the zoning ordinance, I'm quite comfortable with that. And, you know, to request clarification on, and not just me reassuring you, but a clarification on what does this mean relative to the sign package for this entire address. I think that's fine. I think that, but, because I can get those answers for you. And I think that's one side. The other would be is if the pole sign is acceptable, but the color a little stark, I agree, maybe the location pushed back a little bit, I think that's completely in your purview.
Mhm.
And to give me a recommendation that would be, you know, at least to the applicant is, if I can solve these zoning issues, you can probably get this sign approved if you do the following. So, but I, you know, there's, yeah, I'd say recommend denial with the comment about preference for the sign location and color, and citing that, the questions relative to the ordinance.
I guess I'd like to express a consenting or dissenting opinion on that. I don't feel like any applicant should have their application sort of held hostage because of, it's a learning lesson for us, or it points out
I agree.
that our guidelines are not up to date, not enforceable frequently. I just don't, as Ron Bailey, I think, has said, we're really just looking at this application. And I think the reason why all of us have taken so long on a pole sign this evening is that first, these are usually done administratively. I'm looking at all the sign ordinance because we usually don't look at them unless there's a package with a larger project. And we're thinking about all the problems generally, like just generally with this, including future applications from other occupants in the building. So I think I'm ready with a motion to approve. I'm hearing 2 conditions. I'm gonna add a condition that may or may not be enforceable, but I think when we make motions, we can, people can support it or not.
I agree, Sherry. I think we can get to approval on this.
Okay.
Yes.
And I didn't mean to cut off discussion by saying I'm ready for a motion, but I think I'd favor moving ahead. And
I'm ready to hear your motion.
okay, I'm trying to get to having considered the pertinent sections of the city code and the ADC design guidelines for signs and per city code section 34-1041, I move the BAR concur with staff on the administrative approval of the design review component of the sign permit application for the pole sign at 550 East Water Street with the following conditions: that the sign be set back to a position that sets back from the sidewalk
Vertical post.
equally with the first vertical post of the bike rack.
The vertical post of the sign be, okay.
Yes, thank you. And anybody can modify this as we go on. And that second condition, that the pole sign, the sign itself match the wall sign with the dark field and light lettering. In fact, that they'd be identical. And 3, a condition that it's a sentiment of the BAR that this be the only pole sign that is approved for this building.
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, I thought we were, that if there, I could see another pole sign, but I don't want to see 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would have stated it that this is explicitly for this one pole sign. Any future applications for pole signs for this building need to be submitted with a signage package for the entire parcel.
Okay, I'll accept that as a
Okay.
friendly amendment.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Did we lose anybody?
I appreciate that.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
It's,
Thank you.
it is a, like the smaller sometimes you get, the more complicated it can be, and they're even within the ordinance and the BAR guidelines have a couple sign types described differently. So these are all, on my wish list. I think I had mentioned to you all, we had gotten funding to do revision of the design guidelines. However, I'm concerned that, well, not concerned, but the fact that we're revising the ordinance may make sense to hold off on revising the guidelines until we know if there's anything changing in the regs. So, there's always, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or the other way around.
I mean, I having approved this, I would now say if they came back and other businesses say, hey, I like First Heritage sign, can I be out there too? And, I don't understand, I'm expressing an opinion outside now that we voted. I don't understand the reluctance to approve a monument sign. My building on East High Street, similar district, has a monument sign. We sort of have to take it apart in a weird way to insert a new business, but, there are placards that are
Right.
small, not illuminated, there would, within the wall sign. I do think that signage is important, and I don't think that Waze and maps can get us directly into units and buildings. It'll get you to an address.
Right.
We all know addresses are tricky and entrances are tricky, and so I get it. I also think, frankly, signs are advertising, and I'm not saying that's a legitimate, that may not be a legitimate sort of policy consideration for, our sign guidelines. I'm thinking in this case, that's one of the reasons that this applicant wants 2 signs there.
Yeah.
Yeah, people on the street saying, which doors am I looking for?
Well, yeah, that
Right,
too,
the
direct, but I do think it's wayfinding and directional, but I also think it's good advertising, I'm just saying.
Sure.
Yes.
I'm recently a client of this business, and I've never, ever thought to go into their business. I refinanced with this lender in January, and I never knew where they were located, and there was no reason. I question how much foot traffic they really need or have.
Yeah, good
But
point.
I do think, and there are different purposes for signs. But anyway, so the whole thing is conjured up with, I think with a lot of us, like, a need to revisit them.
Yeah, I will
And
tell
what
you
we-
too, it's a lot more signage I deal with in the entrance corridor. And key things there, the regs tell us what size, location, things like that. Key things are lighting, and, the BAR's been sort of the leading force in glare and issues like that. So I apply those. The guidelines allow us to address color and light and lighting. So I'll tell an applicant, it cannot be read at night, and you need to have, your lamping has to meet these conditions. If you don't agree with my administrative conditions, we can take it to the planning commission. And I haven't had to do that with the BAR yet, but that it's worked, and applicants generally are saying, okay, fine, let's make it happen. So, but there's some things we need to clarify, and I appreciate your patience on it.
Well, thanks for handling all of those applications for us too, Jeff, so that we don't have to spend as much time as we did tonight on a pole
Oh
sign.
my God,
Yeah, I know.
I've
Thank
been
you.
here 4 months, and Reed came in with a 3-foot stack in his arms. He goes, Mary Joy told me not to tell you about this until you were sure you were gonna stay. And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, they are. Okay, I'm
Before we
sorry.
get going, let me just do a quick check. Does anyone need a break? Are we okay to keep going? Okay. All right, let's keep going. 0 Preston Place.
We're joined virtually by Lee Boyes, who is the architect for this project.
All right.
But first, we'll get started with Jeff's staff report.
So, just first off, to clarify, there are now, the parcels have an address. It's 2 parcels. I think they have now gotten it down to 1 parcel. But I continued calling it 0 Preston Place.
And
simply-
Jeff, if you don't mind me interrupting, I think just having done addressing for the city, I think addresses are assigned once a building is occupied, so.
Yeah, so but I'm just using it, I use it just because consistency with what we looked at before. It's the
one-
vacant lot or lots at the northeast corner of Preston Place. This is a request for a new residence, single-family residence. It's within the Rugby Road, University Circle, Venable Neighborhood, ADC District. It's a vacant parcel, therefore it's non-contributing, but because it's in the district, you will have design review of anything new built there. All that's on the site currently is some remnant walls of parking garages were constructed there in between 1920s and 1930s. Excuse me. The request came to you, or you all discussed this back in February as a preliminary discussion. Lee brought forward some conceptual elevations and drawings, and there was a series of discussions that you had, and the design is in response to that discussion. I do want to say there's a landscape plan
anticipated, but that's been left out. So there will be some reference to trees and plantings and things, but but those are probably something we will see later. There's a couple of notes in here that I made. For one, relative to zoning, there's the parking area, the driveway. There are code requirements of how much that can take up of the front yard. So I have this in there for us and for the applicant, and just sometimes just simply notes to make sure we remember it. But whatever you all approve doesn't, the ordinance would still prevail. They still have to meet this. So so I think that you all could, if there's anything about the driveway, the landscaping that you want to address, you certainly could, or if you want to just make clear that those will be separate later, you can do that. I had a note in here, and Lee asked me about it, about the consolidation of the two parcels. That's note number 2. That's been wrapped up, so that's a non-issue. And it's one of those where I told Lee, I just kind of had it in there to make sure that, and I don't know if Dan is still here. It's one of those things we just want to keep in mind, make sure our ducks in a row as the process proceeds, but it's nothing that you all need to be addressing. And with that, I think I have in here some of the notes, about 6 bulleted items from your discussion. I've gone through the criteria of sort of looking at size, mass, scale, spacing relative to other buildings within that sub-area, and presented that here. So if you had any questions about how I did the math or what my conclusions, we certainly can discuss those. And scrolling down to my so that's where I am. I think Lee, I encouraged her to be on her computer tonight, so she's.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Shall I address your discussion and recommendation items?
Sure, you can use your time however you see fit, how you'd like to present the project and address any of the points raised by Jeff or the staff.
Okay. So the first point about the stone retaining walls along the property line will be retained as is with new wall added. BAR recommended, or BAR recommended, new wall be differentiated from existing. So we're hoping to actually reuse stone from the wall that we demolished and just build the new, the new retaining wall with that stone, so it actually all matches. There are actually a bunch of stone walls in this small area, the property behind these 2 lots that are combined to make my client's lot, and a lot on Rugby as well. So there's a number of lots that have stone walls. Actually, the one across Preston Place also has a stone wall. So we were just, wanting to reuse the materials that we have in a big pile there, rather than differentiate from the existing walls. So that was just the first point. The second point that Breck had made, concerned about the elaboration of the garage and recommends street-facing door be removed. We agreed with that. It was, I think, too competing with the doors, the front door of the house. So we removed that. We did put a trellis above the windows, which we're planning to grow wisteria on these trellises. The homeowner Sue is a master gardener, and she has big plans for this, for the yard, and they've hired a renowned landscape architect, Barry Stark, who's planning to do the landscape design. So we're excited to see that. See what else. So let's see. So there was another question about our concern about the use of different materials on the facade, the stone in relation to the siding, the horizontal board siding. And I took that very seriously and looked at, the idea of taking the roof line down or popping it up where the stone was. And to do that would seriously alter the floor plan to make it work. And it would also really complicate the roof geometry in the sides and the back of the house. So I also looked at other properties in this area, 620 Preston Place and 622 and 608 all have similar, like a central bay with sides that have the same eave line. So I feel like it's consistent. I mean, yes, the materials are different, but like, so 608, for instance, has a central, it's brick, and then it has two side bays that have the same eave line, but they are, one is like partial brick and then siding and porch below, and the other is, I believe, siding. So I thought it fit well in there. I like this house better with the stone core being, or the core being stone, because I feel like it does kind of help give it the history that it doesn't actually have because it's a new house. And one of my favorite houses, I actually grew up in this neighborhood, and one of my favorite houses is right around the corner, that's all stone. It's on Burnley Avenue, 1705. I've always loved that house. Anyway, so there's right around the corner is a stone house precedent. And just the fact that these storage units that used to occupy all three lots here were stone, it kind of speaks to that somehow. And I think I'll stop talking and I'll let you guys talk. Okay.
First, we'll just check and see if there's any comments from the public. And there's no one here in person, but maybe there is online.
If you wish to provide comment and you're attending online, raise your hand. I see one raised hand from Lisa Kendrick. Ms. Kendrick, I'm going to allow you to talk, and then you need to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Lisa Kendrick, and I live at 622 Preston Place. And I just want to say I really appreciate the thought and the consideration that this architect is putting into this property in this historical neighborhood. They're clearly considering the character of other homes to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood. And it is regretful that the other project was not held accountable for that same consideration. And I am just really excited to see this work that's going to happen. I mentioned to Jeff that Windhurst Way is something that is documented, that is the name of that little spur. that we keep calling, it doesn't really have a name. It's been confusing the whole time I've lived here, that little spur of Preston Place. So that might be something for somebody to consider or look into, that it was originally called Windhurst Way. So, and that's all. I just want to say thanks for the beautiful design that I'm seeing, the consideration that that the designer and the homeowners are including in this fabulous project. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Kendrick.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Kendrick.
you.
Any other questions from the public?
If somebody else would like to provide comment, please raise your hand. I don't see any additional raised hands.
Okay. Questions from the board? I have one while others are pondering. Lee, I wonder if you could describe a little bit further the plan for the windows. They're suggested as simulated divided lights. Are they true simulated divided lights, or what kind of windows are you looking for?
They are, yes. They would be the Pella Architect Series simulated divided light, aluminum clad, factory painted, white. The doors, however, we're thinking they're going to be a bronze or like probably a dark bronze color, similar, to aged copper. That would actually the same color as the gutters and downspouts and the roof.
Okay. Thank you.
About reusing the stone, I actually think that's a good idea. Do we need to make sure that, and I'm asking my fellow board members this, do we need to make sure that there is a distinction between the stone that's just happened, the stone wall that just is still there versus the new one that will now be made with stone that is already on the property? Is that a problem of pretending in some way false historicism? I actually think it might look pretty good.
I think there are many ways the stone wall could be distinguished, even if it's reusing some of the existing stone. I guess I'd offer a couple questions. It seemed to me from the renderings that the proposed wall is different in height than the ruin that was there. First of all, it's a low stone wall, has a different geometry. And maybe, Lee, you could also comment on how that stone might be put together. I'm guessing it will need to be mixed with additional stone.
Correct. And the varying heights, I had actually in SketchUp shrunk the height of the, I need to confirm the actual heights, but so that I could get a decent perspective from the back. So there's some, non-truth to the height of the wall there. I need to confirm what it is.
So it's not 3 or 4 feet like it looks like in the perspective.
Let me see which perspective.
I think in any case we would be limited to 6 feet per our guidelines. Is that correct? Which would be shorter than the existing wall.
Yes, it would be shorter than the existing wall, any new wall. The new wall would be 4 feet.
Okay. And
right, but yeah, that perspective on S 1.2 is a bit deceiving because it doesn't show the actual, the grade change to the lot behind.
The existing wall is how tall? It's taller than 6 feet.
It
right?
Yeah, it's
10 or 12 feet.
It's not that
Okay.
high. Let's see. I don't think it's higher than 8 feet, honestly. But I can get back to you on that. I haven't measured it.
And do you have a sense of how the new wall would be constructed? If it would presumably be mortared, but would you be looking to replicate the mortaring and the kind of, or would it be raked back or a different detail?
The idea would be to try to match what is there. I mean, there's quite a bit of mortar. The Lewises would want to keep that little spur of a wall that's sticking out basically like a buttress and step it down and kind of turn it into a planter. But then use a lot of the stone, all of the stone there's a big pile of stone that's fallen. And then they're going to take out a big section of the existing stone retaining wall. They just want to collect all of that. And it shouldn't be too difficult to match, if at all.
So if I'm looking at the S1.1.
I think you're muted, or for everyone
Am I?
else.
I
Oh,
was
sorry,
muted,
James
sorry.
was.
Are we in question section?
We're in the question section, correct?
If I'm looking at.
Could you hear me?
Yes, S1.1. So you just mentioned that they're demolishing a section of the original retaining wall.
Mhm.
I assume.
Right.
So basically to just take advantage of the jog and the property line.
Correct.
And then the existing retaining wall that's in the adjacent property would be left in situ, and is it also the taller 10-foot or whatever it is, 8 foot?
It is not that. No, it steps down, and the
Okay.
property steps down as well.
Okay. I mean, I do
So
think-
we're
sorry,
actually
go ahead.
going to build up a bit of the grade on the side of the garage and have a new stone retaining wall there.
I mean, I think that when you connect the dots, you can see where that original retaining wall was, and so we're, in essence, creating this big V into it. So I'm not overly opposed to reusing some of the stone, but I do think there should be a differentiation in the mortar color or some way to make it distinct, and that, this isn't the footprint of the original retaining wall.
Okay.
Other questions for the applicant? Okay, I'll see if there's any comments from the public.
If you wish to provide any comment, please raise your hand. I don't see any raised hands.
All right, commentary from the board. I agree with James. I think that wall would and the project would do well to differentiate itself from one of the kind of really few key historic features on the site. I think it's okay to reuse the stone. I think it's good that the height is different. I think one simple way to do that is just to rake the mortar back and not smear the mortar right at the face. I think it will be very different in color overall and be more attractive.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, actually. Like more of a dry stack look or just little less mortar or darker mortar.
Yeah, it will give the wall a little bit more texture. I think you'll see the stone color of the stone a little bit more, and it'll just differentiate itself in a subtle but important way.
Yeah, and the photograph number 3 on sheet S 1.0, it looks like there's maybe a cut stone cap on the top of the existing wall.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your intention to match that, or?
No,
Okay.
no, I think we want to just do a mortared, fieldstone cap, similar to 4 S 1.0.
I'm not seeing what you're.
Even though that's a tiny little,
Oh, the
teeny
curb?
little wall.
Like the curb?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so-
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any other comments from the board? Or someone want to make a motion? The only other comment that I is kind of sticking with in my brain and that I've circled on my drawings here is that the arched dormers on the garage structure look like they just haven't been developed as much yet, and they have kind of a very, very short overhang that seems a little bit out of keeping with the other roof overhangs, and I didn't know quite how that would. It seems like it will. There's more design resolution that's needed there, but I'm just curious if there's any thought of how that arched dormer could have similar care given to its shadow line and overhang as some of the other eave conditions.
Yeah, I personally like a much simpler, like a poor man's cornice on a dormer, to differentiate it from the rest of the roof. Because I feel like it's too much. There's a book that I kind of use as my guide through life called Get Your House Right, which I'm sure you've heard of before. And whenever there's a kind of a question like that, I kind of refer to it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I just think it would be, I don't think it would look right to have a deeper eave over the dormers.
Yeah, I guess maybe I would see even reading the fascia if there's going to be any additional shadow lines, or is that it almost looks like a single fascia board in the elevations.
Right. So that I don't know, Jeff, if you have access to that wall sections sheet.
Oh, I can pull that up, Lee. Just give me a moment.
Okay, thanks. So I'm kind of questioning it as well, whether or not it should have be a flat panel recessed, or if it should actually have siding. So you're correct. There is still, there are details to be worked out, but we just really like the general appearance of the archtop dormer. So I believe the archtop dormer is in the second page, right there. And And so, the question mark, is this a recessed panel or is this siding?
Oh, I see. That has even more detail than the elevations that were in our package.
Right.
Well, I don't have it's not a strong objection. I guess it's just, as you're developing that further, I guess my concern is that if it gets really flat, really, without some of that shadow, but it looks like even with the recessed panel would do a little bit of that also.
Right. Yeah. But we do need to study that and make sure that it's that it looks, perfect.
Any other comments from the board? Anybody ready to make a motion?
I'll take a stab at it. That's all right.
Thank you, Ron. That would be great.
All right. So, having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including the city design guidelines, I move to find the proposed single-family house, garage, and landscaping. There's a question before that. Are we going to have landscaping before us in the future? And should that be removed from this?
I believe that's the case.
So then the family house and garage, we'll skip over it, no landscaping. At 0 Preston Place, satisfy the BAR's criteria and are compatible with this property and other properties in the Rugby Road, University Circle, Venable Neighborhood, ADC District, and the BAR approves the application with the following conditions: that the stone reused to make the new walls be differentiated from the older walls that are still standing there.
Here a second.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions about the wording?
Maybe the wording just clarifies site retaining walls.
Friendly amendment, site retaining walls.
Thank you, sir.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? So I think the motion passes as at 5-1 with Alejandro.
It's 4-1.
4-1.
Yeah.
I would say, if it's helpful, when we have situations like this where we have a historic or something, a remnant of something, we're trying to make our BAR archives complete, and we request them when folks, there's a demolition, they do a documentation, photos and things, and get them to us. So I think it would be helpful, situation like this, to have, that, and invite Lee to do it, to get us photo documentation that we put in our files. And I'm going to show you all the project in the question period where we have the original set of drawings from like 1910. So that's a good way to memorialize something like that, if it would be helpful.
Okay.
Well, thank you and good luck. We'll look
Thank
forward
you.
to seeing the landscape plan.
Yes, me too.
Okay, I think, Jeff, that means we're over to you for the IPP designation.
And we're joined virtually with 2 people representing the project, I believe, Joe Riege and Zach Zingsheim. And we can hear from them if they'd like after Jeff offers his staff report.
So just a little bit of background. This was or is in the process of a special use permit, or a rezoning request related to its use that's going through the Planning Commission, and actually went to Planning Commission. Will go to City Council on August the 1st. During those discussions, the applicant expressed support for designating the property as an individually protected property, which is the city's designation for a property that's not within a historic district. It becomes its own individual district, just like my house. So I'm separate from North Downtown, but I have IPP designation and therefore subject to BAR review. So with the applicant's consent to that, we proceeded with a staff report to the Planning Commission last Tuesday, and the Planning Commission recommended, because council in designating an individually protected property may, according to the ordinance, may take into consideration the recommendations of the Planning Commission and the Board of Architectural Review. So your role in this is to recommend to the BAR or not that they amend the zoning and designate this an individually protected property. So that's where we are procedurally. As I said earlier in the meeting, I think this is a site most of you all are familiar with. It was awarded a BAR recognition for 2021, recognizing as the report, the award said, a 2021 Preservation and Design Award for important preservation of a significant neighborhood structure. This was an acknowledgement of the owner's efforts to do improvements to the building, even though it's not required as part of a historic designation. And the site it's interesting, and this is the former location of the Trinity Episcopal Church. And Trinity was formed as a congregation in 1919. And the church was actually located at the bottom of the hill where High Street comes into Preston Avenue and West Market Street. And you can even see the church in the old aerial photos, but there's sort of in front of the county office building in McIntyre Road, there's a large traffic island pocket park, but that's where the church was located. And in 1939, when the construction of Lane High School and McIntyre Road, land was acquired for those projects and forced the congregation to relocate. They moved to a site at the corner of 10th and Grady, at that northeast corner, and were able to acquire another Presbyterian church, a former Presbyterian church that had been built in Palmyra in 1910. So that building was, as they say, it was disassembled, so wasn't moved in whole, although we know it can be done. So it was moved and reassembled on the site at 415 10th Street. Soon thereafter, an addition was made on the west side of this of the church, which is referred to as the parish hall, and a rectory was constructed on the side of it to the south. It's all on that corner parcel at 10th and Grady. There's possibility that the parish hall and the rectory were located from elsewhere, so they may have been constructed prior to 1939. We're not sure. We know absolutely the church was. We know where it came from. We also understand that nothing from the former site at High Street, Preston Avenue, was moved to this site. And so that's the story of the buildings. But what is, I think, of more importance to the community is the story of the site, the story of this congregation. And it's impossible to kind of list the story, but in this being a presentation to you as an architectural history, not all of that's in there, but the church's role in the civil rights movements in the 50s and the 60s, and I think even today, Trinity Episcopal is really recognized for its diversity of its congregation and its continued commitment to that. But they did worship here until the late 70s and then moved to their current location around the corner just past Washington Park. But this, the church, again, for the benefit of folks at home, while we included this in our neighborhood survey that we completed 2 years ago for the 10th and Page neighborhood, for the National Register, it was recommended as an eligible resource within what they recommend as the 10th and Page Historic District on the state and national register. But that we haven't gotten to the point where we've discussed any of that as a state and national recognition yet. But in its, the building was associated with leaders of the city's African-American community who attended Trinity Episcopal Church and also the ministers who presided there. It made significant strides to unite and empower Black Charlottesville residents during the city's era of segregation. Such individuals as Reverend Cornelius Dawson, Reverend Henry Mitchell, and George Ferguson were all part of the congregation and the community, and also distinguished leaders in Charlottesville's civil rights movement. Reverend Dawson led Trinity Episcopal between 1936 and 1946, and he assisted the local nurse Daisy Green in founding the Janie Porter Barrett Nursery School. It was a preschool that first served African-American families, and it remains the state of Virginia's longest operating daycare. And there's quite a history to that nursery school as well. Reverend Mitchell helmed the church between 1958 and 1977, and he launched a program, the Trinity Program, in 1964, which provided Black children with summer camp activities as well as year-round preschool services. And Reverend Mitchell was also the first Black president of the Charlottesville City School Board. And then George Ferguson, active in the congregation, was a prominent Black undertaker in the city, and he led Charlottesville's NAACP as its president and campaigned for the integration of the University of Virginia Hospital. So those are just three of the individuals that come up associated with this site and with this church and with this congregation. But it's also, to speak to the building architecturally, it is rather unique. I think Robert took a look at what do we have as far as framed churches in the city, and I think this is one of very few, and certainly the only one that has this sort of vernacular Gothic architecture to it. So it really is a fascinating building in so many ways. And then a third piece that Robert pointed out in his putting together his summary is that it's an intact campus, if you will, for a church. It's got the rectory, the parish hall, and the sanctuary, and they're all there, and they're all pretty much in their original form. And it's so it is a neat site to be able to make some effort for preservation, and that's what, with the IPP designation, it would be any alterations, demolitions, new construction would be subject to BAR review and approval, and under the same criteria as for the ADC district guidelines. So that's where, a lot in here, obviously a lot more that can be said. I think what's a really great opportunity here is that there's a story that can be some of these questions that came up in the Planning Commission and others, like where did the rectory come from? Where did the parish hall come from? What are some additional pieces to this story that with this designation, it allows the building to stay intact, the site to stay intact, so that we can continue to add to those stories. We don't have to answer all the questions to grant the IPP designation, but the IPP designation does allow this building to stay and give us a reason to continue to look for the answers to this story. So with that, our recommendation is that you all recommend to City Council that they approve the request to designate this an IPP. And I don't know if the folks at Stony Point have any more to offer to that, or you have any questions for them, but that's the summary I wanted to offer.
No, you pretty much knocked it out of the park there. We're willing to just take on any questions that you may have.
I would just never tell a lacrosse guy that he hit it out of the park. It's
Fair enough, fair enough.
Well,
Thank
thank you to everyone that was involved. Part of the joy of serving on this board is learning more about the city we live in, and it's projects like these that teach us more about our past and why this is important work that we do. So thank you for all of the efforts that go into this, and for I guess it's not the applicants, the owners' commitment to continuing to preserve this important buildings. Any questions or other comments from the board?
Let me just point out from the Planning Commission point of view, this parcel came to the Planning Commission by the applicant Stony Point for rezoning so that they could use the church for something other than a residence or a church, and in particular for some gatherings. And they voluntarily restricted the kinds of things that they would do in this church and on the parcel, the three buildings. But then, as a result of the community speaking out, this parcel and this church is closely connected to the 10th and Page community. They are really one and the same, and the community asked that the property be protected if it was going to be rezoned, and the Stony Point voluntarily withheld their application, deferred it, and sought the IPP designation as a result of the community's request, and I want to commend them for taking that step. It's a little unfortunate. It had the interior now, while it has in the sanctuary all the historic fabric inside, the Carpenter Gothic details, the chancel area was really wonderful. It had a decorative frame screen for the choir and the organ, and then a separate area for the chancel and the altar and a reredos. But unfortunately, when the last church that had the property, they left, they took those elements with them. Back, when was that? When did they leave?
There was, after Trinity vacated, there was another congregation.
It was
Evangel-
2018.
I'm sorry?
2018 was when the last congregation left and took the remaining pieces.
Okay, yeah, so it left before Stony Point took ownership of it. But it still has extraordinary character inside. So, again, I commend the Stony Point for taking this step.
Any other comment?
I had a question just for Jeff. When was the last time the city designated a property as a new IPP?
That's a very good question, because I had to, Robert and I are going through the files with magnifying glasses trying to find the last staff report to pirate off of. It was, I think 2008 was the last time for an IPP. And it was a series of those. And the reason there were 12 properties designated with that, and it was initiated by City Council asking the BAR to come up with a candidate list of properties. And actually, this property was on that initial list. And there's not really an explanation of why it was left off, but I mean, it was about 50 properties. And so the BAR essentially sponsored the recommendation that went to council. So
it's again, more of those things that the BAR, has an opportunity to be involved in more often if we think something could be, so.
Thank you.
I thank you guys too at Stony Point. I thank you for this. It's been, we've putting it together, and we've hopefully this is all going to pay off on August 1st at City Council meeting. So, but I appreciate you guys, and I thank you for your efforts on this.
Absolutely. Yeah. The big thing I think for us is just really to be able to get this building back to where the community can utilize it, because since we've done the renovation, we really haven't been able to do much at all with the property, and that's kind of a shame. It's a beautiful place to be, and I know the 10th and Page Neighborhood Association's really looking forward to their first meeting inside the building.
So you have to make a motion?
I would love to. Having reviewed the criteria for designation of individually protected properties per City Code Section 34-274, I move the BAR recommend that City Council approve the request to designate 415/415B 10th Street Northwest, parcel 4-46, and individually protected properties. Excuse me.
You made it.
August 31st.
Thank I didn't have any conditions.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Well done.
I just wanted to say that thank you for staff for so thoroughly, because we don't have these very often, obviously, going through all of the 8 criteria that this board is supposed to review and discuss for in such a nomination embodied in City Code 34-274. This one hits solidly all 8. It's kind of really amazing, and I don't think that the City Code nor that us historically, I have been in my previous service in the BAR, we did designate several properties as new IPPs, but there's no requirement that all of them be met, but this certainly meets all 8 very strongly. So thank you again to Stony Point Development. I had actually nominated this, and I was very aggressive about it, for the Preservation Awards in December, and I didn't think that it was actually approved by the rest of the BAR. There were members of the BAR that did not want to recognize it because they said they needed more information about what was done and what was done inside, and I thought, wasn't it apparent what was done? The property looked beautiful because the owner had taken good care of it outside. Now obviously it's subject to our guidelines, but I've been intrigued by this property for 30 years, and I really, really am excited that it'll be around for, now it's been in the city 80 years, it'll be around for another, 180 hopefully. So, thank you.
Of course, we need to vote on that to make sure of that.
I was in the comment section. I was in the discussion section.
Any other comment? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
During, I can tell you also, there were, some of the comments that we received internally, I don't think they made it to the planning commission, or may have been presented to you all, but people are asking why the city has not designated more sites associated with the Black history in this town, and there are several, and maybe we don't talk about those enough, but it's also in a position where you're not, we've surveyed 10th and Page, we've surveyed Sart Hill, we surveyed Rose Hill neighborhood. All 3 were recommended for the National Register. But to then take it that next step for the state and national register, you've really got to have overwhelming neighborhood, neighborhood support, but property owner support. And then for that local designation, North Belmont's an example where that's on the National Register as a historic district.
as I understand, when that was done, the folks there said, we're fine with that. We do not want local designation. A similar situation would happen in Fifeville. So it's there are sites that could be recognized. I think the 10th and Page survey certainly identified a lot. But it's not, the city can't just go in and say, we designate. It really does have to come from the community, and it has to have community support. We have the C.H. Brown Historic Conservation District, which is working its way. And Reverend Brown is working with the folks there. But what I really need from them is, it's 6 properties. I need to hear from all 6 owners that they support this, and that's sort of where we are. That's why you haven't heard me talk about it, but that is something, an opportunity to recognize the things that Reverend Brown did, and Reverend Brown's father did, C.H. Brown did, and so the sites are out there, and I think you all, we can work to elevate them and work to talk about them, but those recognitions really have to, or those designations really require the folks that own those properties asking that it be done. So it's not a matter of we won't do it. That's all, if that helps. All right, so I can quickly go through.
Can I make another comment as long as we're hovering over that? I wanted to just commend staff for all the research that went into that. I know that Mr. Watkins in particular and Mr. Warner did a lot of research historically on the use of the building and the original historic congregation Trinity. I mean, gosh, it was used until 2018 by congregations from 1977 forward, so it's got another 50 years of also having been used as a religious building. But I wanted to just recognize it was a really, really interesting staff report.
It was fun to try to figure out where the wood churches are in Charlottesville.
And you only found 2, right?
Woolen Mills, the chapel, and then there's an old church building that's been converted to condos behind the Quirk Hotel on, I guess, Commerce Street.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's Bethel.
Right, and that was the original home of
Barrett.
The Barrett, right?
Yes, yeah. And then the St. Paul's Memorial Church, before the brick building that's there now, that was a wood church as well. But other than that, I couldn't find any other wood churches in Charlottesville.
Yeah, and it
Maybe
burned
it
down.
went down with the rotunda.
Yeah.
Yeah, the young man that designed the masonry was the first black licensed architect in the state of Virginia. So
Wow, cool.
What?
This is on
Ebenezer.
oh, I get all my streets.
Are you talking about the St. Paul's?
Star Hill. No.
Oh, you're talking about Barrett?
No. The masonry church that's there on
Ebenezer.
Yeah.
Ebony, yeah.
By Lankford. He was the first, registered African-American architect in Virginia and Washington, D.C. His office was in D.C., but he did a lot of things in Virginia.
So there's, the stories are there. It's just bringing them to the surface
And this is just the iceberg. I feel like, we could have a UVA master's student come in and write a whole thesis about the church and where the buildings were moved from and whatnot. But this is just, like Jeff said, just the tip of the iceberg.
What's been nice about this one too is after the planning commission meeting in June, my boss pulled me aside and said, how do we get this thing to council in August? And I said, well, I got to go to the planning commission. I also have to go to the BAR, and then the BAR isn't meeting until, so it was literally trying to sort out the spaghetti of how do we line all this up that it happened. So there was just a lot of effort internally in City Hall as well to say, how do we make this happen? Let's do it. So it's nice to have a whole lot of people in the dugout, and forgive the baseball reference, but it was good. And Robert, yes, I can't think of a better person to hand this to and say, fill in the blanks here.
Well, yeah, not only that, but your
Bravo.
all's leadership and how to
Thanks.
take it forward and get all those hoops jumped.
All right, so quickly, we have, just again, restate, August 16th, we are meeting at 4 o'clock. And we're going to look at whatever things they have, then come in here for the meeting. We will have the discussion that evening, and if we meet on the 31st.
The location is on site?
We are going to meet over there, yeah, and I'm guessing, I'll be there with the red balloon or something.
For the pre-meeting, and then we'll come back
Right.
here.
Right.
Yeah.
So 4 o'clock will be basically across the street from the courthouse.
Correct.
Mhm.
Look at the brick
In front of
samples,
the
things like
levy
that.
building.
Right. And then, and then if we meet, we'll know later that evening if we're gonna need a special meeting on the 31st. Second thing, I just wanted to let you all know, Carl Schwartz was appointed to the Planning Commission last night.
Yay.
We,
Good.
yes, someday I'll share the note I wrote to council about him. He was a little embarrassed, but Carl's definitely one of those good people that, he deserves to have a lot of nice things said about him.
When I wrote to 2 members of council, they both replied within an hour positively. I mean, of course, they weren't going to say that they were voting for him, but they bothered during a very busy business day. I didn't think I'd get a response, for a day or so, but yeah. So.
Yeah, I received a note earlier that it looked like on August 1st, council will also be considering a action to put us back to normal. I don't know. I've been hearing that for so long. I feel uncomfortable leaving my house now, so I'm not sure I want to come back to work, but we may find out.
Just now, having my experience with Omicron, I'm not sure about this return to normal.
I agree with you. And with that, I had a question I wanted to ask, where I get to get some expert advice from you all, if you don't mind. And Robert, can you put that
Yeah,
up,
just give me a moment.
please? Sorry.
No, you're good.
Oh, while you're looking for that, for some reason, as you know, we have a vacancy for a licensed architect and a vacancy for a historian or experienced in historic preservation. We have those 2 seats vacant on the BAR. For whatever reason, doesn't pop up as on the vacancy list, but anybody that's out there, or if any of you all know folks, please have them touch base with me, because the application form is you can access it and they can fill it out. So we need to get some movement on that. We will find out who, I guess in a month, who Planning Commission decides to give us. We had discussed if Carl, but it was kind of like, does he want it? But we'll see. But I do really very much want to fill those other 2 seats, and to anyone out there, licensed architect, a historic preservationist, historian, city residency is required. All right, so this is we don't worry about address. This is a house in city, which, this is the stuff Robert and I love when he happened to come over my house. He popped in, I said, oh my God, look what I just found. And found a file deep in the recesses of the computer. This is just the front elevation, but the original drawings of a house constructed, I think in 1910 or 1901. And the reason I'm asking you all about this is the owner's replacing the roof. The roof was long ago replaced with asphalt. They're putting on new asphalt. I said, fine, that's, you're replacing in kind with in kind. Go to the next slide. And so this is from that drawing. There are a series of dormers, and it's unfortunate, this had been a slate roof with all this really interesting metal work. And the dormers had been trimmed out in slate, or at least that's how the drawings were shown. Go ahead, Robert. And it's not, actually, if you go to 1 or 2 down, you'll see, yeah, that one's good. It appears now that they are just asphalt shingles. So, what's interesting, see that is the original gutter there, and that's even from the original drawings. Pretty neat what's still there. That's being repaired and maintained. But, so my question is, they have these dormers, the slate's gone. There's a modern picture, should be, I think, one up, yeah, they said, well, can we just put siding on the dormers? And I know I can't say, no, you have to put slate back. I'm not sure about this. I had mentioned to them, there's at least the Hardy Plank makes that product that's like a shingled material. And the reference, the thing is, that's why I mentioned that, that documentation earlier with Zero Preston Place. We have these drawings, so we know it was there. We have a documentation of it. So it's not that I have to, we're not replicating, but we have that record was there. But what they're putting back, would it be?
They're putting asphalt shingles back?
Mm-hmm.
Did you recommend synthetic slate? Or at least mention it?
I think they're past that because there's an awful lot of other things that are happening that are having, there's just a lot they have to do. So I mean, the other thing would be just say, put asphalt shingles back like what you have, but I just think that's horrid looking. But, and this is again where it's a maintenance issue, they're replacing in kind. I could generally work with people on this, but this is one I just wasn't sure what we would prefer.
Why do you say you don't recommend asphalt?
Well, it's
I mean, it looks fine here.
I mean, I agree. I think it's in the spirit of the slate, like
Yeah,
having that
it
kind of
matches the roof material.
the shingled look. If you're not gonna go back with slate, it still is in the spirit of that.
Yeah.
And hopefully maybe the product they choose will be an architectural shingle that has a little depth to it.
Well, I like this dark black or gray.
It's a gray that
because
would-
it's very slate-like.
And actually what's
Yeah,
there
very
is kind
uniform.
of reddish. It's really an unfortunate color that show up here, but, all right, I was gonna tell them simply that at least you get some good flashing and ice and water, wrap that thing and then put on whatever they put on it. It's, I don't know, bending corners with asphalt shingles is.
So I wondered about maybe doing a stained shake, like a cedar shake or something.
Well, that was where I was sort of going with the Hardy Plank product. And so this is one of the situations, sort of like a sign where I'd say, all right, I'm okay. It's not original, you're not replacing the original, I can't make you replace the original. But here's what I suggest you do. If you don't agree with me, we can go ask the VAR. So that's the flexibility I have here. But I don't know, standing here now, JD, you're right, yeah, the shingles do replicate at least the appearance of what was there, or what he was there.
And, I mean, like James said, it's in the spirit of it, where they have the same color, the same texture, and the shingle does. Some sort of weatherboard would just change even if it was painted to match the roof, would change the texture.
All right, that's helpful.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, if
And
it's
who's the architect?
sort of like
The
to your
original
point, if it was a
drawing?
Hardy Plank slate or shingle
Yeah.
that was the same color as the asphalt shingles for the roof, so it kind of blended, that might work, but
I mean, weirdly, the one thing about the asphalt shingle is that it's probably thin enough material that it still kind of displays that slight curvature and display of.
yeah. And I don't think they're wrapping the corner here. It looks like there's actually butts.
Yeah, I think they cut
Yeah.
that corner.
So in the drawings, there was a note for what they called a New York hip. Is that a term you're familiar with, Jody?
I know, yeah. It's,
Is that, do we think that was like a metal cap on that, or do we think that was actually like a slate hip cap or ridge cap?
I have no idea.
A.B. Mullet and Company Architects, Washington DC. Mullett.
Business up front, party in the back.
Boy, they went to Washington here.
This is a residence.
sweet piece is small enough, it almost could have been a single piece.
Oh, you think just a, wow, yeah.
Wow.
Huh.
I don't know.
Oh, it would have been, yeah, I can't imagine it being.
Doubt that.
What the G runs to galvanized iron?
Yeah, so they refer, yeah, galvanized iron gutter,
With iron straps.
and all that's still there.
Those
So-
are the vertical lines you see on the face of the gutter? The iron straps, maybe?
I thought that meant it was a terracotta.
I mean, I could be wrong.
But
Those are the
no,
metal
I think-
straps that hold it on.
No, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Great stuff. I mean, as I said, we wish
What an interesting house.
to have drawings like this for.
The drawing
The big one?
It's,
That's a pity looks like the dormers had casement windows originally. It's a pity they got rid of those.
Yeah.
I wonder what the interior looks like.
After those drawings, but it's always kind of awkward when you share people's houses. All right, well, thank you all. That's all I had, and that helps me very much. And we're finished a lot earlier than I anticipated, so I'm sorry I was in a mood earlier. Just a lot going on the last 2 weeks. And, but I'm glad we were able to resolve all the questions we had tonight.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, second.
All
Second.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, y'all.